Hi, this is Dr. John Michael Salvato, and you're watching Inner Alchemy, the Science of Spiritual Living. Today, we're going to be taking on part 5 of our 7 Hermetic Principles. I apologize in advance that I'm still working through the process of putting this laryngitis behind me. So if my voice is a little rough and a little weak, thank you for understanding that I am doing my very best today. So what I want to do as we begin is I want to read to you from the Kybalion the section on the principle of rhythm. This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion, to and fro, a flow, an inflow, a swing backward and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide-like ebb and flow, a high tide, a low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described just before. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, mind, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally, in the mental states of humanity. And it is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. You see, today we're going to talk about how this principle impacts the life and the practice of magic for those who are metaphysicians. The principle of rhythm states that everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. The pendulum swings and manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. So I believe that there is powerful magical insight here. The principle of rhythm is a universal law. That means it's immutable. Winter will always follow autumn. Spring will always follow winter. Summer will always follow spring, just as day follows night and night follows day. See, we see this in the tides, we see this in the lunar cycles and in the seasons, and we as magical practitioners strive to attune ourselves to nature, to the seasons, to the rhythms of life. And we understand this immutable law in its direct relationship to the principle of polarity that we spoke about last week. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, when we talk about the principle of polarity, once a magical practitioner understands that apparent opposites, what we perceive as being opposites, are really just variant degrees of the same thing. As we talked about last week, dark and light are the same thing, they're just different degrees. Cold and hot, different degrees of the same thing, happy and sad. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. And so we recognize that the essential difference, or polarity, is a matter of vibrational frequency. See, this is a very important concept to really understand. The ebb and flow, or the rhythm of life, is an immutable law. It affects all things visible and invisible. As you heard from the Kybalion when I was reading that passage, this is the very thing that causes nations to rise and fall, that causes humanity to go through the cycles, or as Jim Rohn would call, the seasons of life. And when the practitioner can unlock the key to mastery of their experiences, by understanding this, they are able to master themselves. So let's imagine an example. On the screen in front of you, you see Johnny. Johnny is an alchemist and a witch who understands that the cycle of the seasons, which is simply a witchy way of expressing the principle of rhythm, is an immutable law. Johnny knows that by working with the laws in life, by working with these universal laws, he's able to gain greater mastery. So he applies this principle of rhythm in his daily life. Johnny is aware that the principle of rhythm applies to his mood and his emotions. Some days he's happy and other days not so much. And he recognizes that this cycle of happy moods following sad moods and sad moods following happy moods is part of that rhythm. He sees it in himself, he sees it in those around him. And by understanding that, he's able to take that next powerful step. You see, Johnny knows the pendulum is going to keep on swinging. The rhythm, the principle of rhythm dictates that that pendulum swings perpetually in every aspect of our lives, to and fro. But the practitioner of alchemy is able to step off at any point. See, we call this the mental law of neutralization. It is the point of power in bringing together, harnessing the law of polarity and the law of rhythm, recognizing that there is a way to step off that roller coaster, or step off that merry-go-round, if you will. And while the pendulum keeps on swinging, Johnny notices that his mood is headed toward the sad side of the pendulum, the sad side of that spectrum. He recalls that both happy and sad are actually the same thing. They're words that we use to describe our mood. And that the only difference between happy and sad is vibrational frequency. So therefore, Johnny says, hey, I am going to say no. I am not going to ride this pendulum to sadness. And so he steps off and he finds his point of innate equilibrium. Now, in our traditions, many of us call this point of innate equilibrium his home frequency. And if you can't master or return to or identify your home frequency, then any of your practice and all of your practice becomes more difficult, because you're not grounded. You're not aware of where that point of power is. And that point of power is always in the present moment. And everyone's home frequency is different. It's unique. It's like it's your energetic fingerprint. So this allows Johnny, by returning to his home frequency, by recognizing he has the power to step off that cycle and not move towards sadness, now he's able to neutralize the impact of that law in his life. See, the principle of polarity and the principle of rhythm are the gateway to rediscovering our home frequency. And our home frequency is the key to personal and magical mastery. Now, it may surprise you that among these 7 principles of Hermetic science that the Kybalion shares with us or encapsulates, that this is such a brief and short principle to convey, but don't let that distract you from the importance, from the power, from the potential that this has to really transform your life. And you're going to see in the next couple weeks, as we wrap up this series, how these principles begin to build on one another. And once we find or rediscover our home frequency by applying what we know about these immutable laws, we're able to manifest more effectively in every aspect of our lives. So that concludes this 5th in the series of 7 of the Hermetic principles outlined in the Kybalion. I hope this has been helpful for you. As you start to look back at what we've shared over the last few weeks, maybe it's beginning to make a little more sense to you that these principles, this idea of being able to truly and absolutely be the author of your experiences is not just some metaphysical or new age or new thought fluff, but is actually the foundation of living a more empowered life. So as I say at the end of every one of our shows, I hope that you'll return to the moment, because in that moment, you'll find the point of power. In that moment, you'll find the key to gratitude. Because if we can't be grateful for the things that we've got right now, there is absolutely no reason to try to get more. And always remember, the best is yet to come. We'll talk to you soon.